the best podcast on the planet.
Have you ever stopped to wonder what it is that makes an individual great? Is it what they own? Is it what they believe? Is it what they've accomplished? Is it what they've given up? If you're ready to wander down that thought process for just a few minutes, we are joined today by a wonderful individual. First of all, a great guy that has excellent taste in eyewear. He clearly has great taste in eyewear. Eric Metaxas, who I've had the pleasure of knowing for a while and has written a handful of really good books. Highly recommend. Just go online, Google Eric Metaxas, Metaxas, and be ready for the avalanche of texts of the books that he has put together, and you're going to enjoy all of them. But we're going to talk about today three that he's done. 7 Men and the Secret of Their Greatness, 7 More Men and the Secret of Their Greatness, and probably a very important volume in between there, along with other works, 7 Women and the Secret of Their Greatness. Eric, thanks for stopping by. Thanks for being on the program, man.
Well, listen, thanks for having me. And yes, the first book I wrote, people know me as a writer of biographies. A lot of people know me because of my Bonhoeffer book.
Yeah.
And before that, I wrote a biography of William Wilberforce. And I really fell in love with telling these stories. But I realized I can't possibly tell the whole story in a book form of all these amazing people. So that's when I came up with the idea to write my book, 7 Men. And I said, these are 7 men from history whose stories are so inspiring, you have got to know the story. And,
right.
If you don't have time to read a book, you could just read this chapter and you'll know the story. So I wrote 7 Men. And of course, people said to me, well, are you going to write 7 women? And I thought, well, you know what? Yeah, I guess why wouldn't I, right? So
exactly.
We're having a crisis of manhood in the culture, which is why I wrote that book first. But I then wrote 7 Women, and the response to those books has been so amazing. I mean, honestly, truly, I didn't expect the response to be as strong as it was. So I pretty quickly thought someday I have to write 7 More Men and then write 7 More Women. So 7 More Men, of course, is out right now. It just came out, or it's just coming out now as we're speaking. And then 7 More Women will come out a year from now. But these are just inspiring stories. And I think, particularly now with this weird epidemic and shutdown, but always we need inspiration. We need stories that just make us think about our lives and make us want to be better people. And that's ultimately what happens when you encounter the people in these books. And that is why I wrote them.
So I got to ask you the tough question right up front. What is it that makes an individual great? Is there a standard definition of greatness? Is it is it what you overcome? What do you consider? I know it's subjective. I think to everybody's personality and their perspective, but what do you think is the common denominator for greatness?
For me, ultimately, and this really does make us think deeply, right, about what is the meaning of life? What is it to be great? And by the way, do we even believe in such a thing? Because some people would say, you know what, I don't believe in God. I don't believe that we're created. We're just here for a while. So this whole idea of good or evil is subjective and whatever. I don't have that view. Over the course of my life, I've come to know firmly that there is a God who created us with a purpose. So then the question is, of course, what is that purpose? Why are we here? And inevitably, you come up to this idea of the definition of love, the biblical definition of love. The Bible in the New Testament uses, obviously it's written in Greek. I'm Greek, so I like to boast about the fact that the New Testament is written in Greek. And by the way, Christos Anesti. But the point is that the New Testament gives us 4 different words for love, 4 different Greek words. But God's idea of divine love is agape. Mm-hmm. And what that means is to live your life for someone else or for some greater idea, to be selfless, not in the Buddhist sense, but in the sense that God created me to love others by doing good things for them, by caring for them, by caring about my country, by caring about my community, by caring about strangers, maybe people that I never will meet or met. But that's the real idea of love. The love of the Bible, the agape love of God, is a selfless love. So it's not about feelings. It's about how you live and what you do. And so there's a selflessness at the heart of it. And when you see this in a hero or a heroine, you know it right away. And you say, that is right. I want to be like that. I don't know if I could be like that. But when I see that, it inspires me and it makes me realize, guess what? I was made to be that way. And I'm not talking about being a doormat, obviously. I'm just talking about heroic greatness when somebody gives their talents and their energies over to doing something beautiful, not just in a self-interested way. And that's, to me, the common denominator in my 7 Women book and my 7 Men book. And now again, in my book, 7 More Men, the new book, it's the same thing. You have different figures doing this in very different ways. And that's another thing I like about it, is that it's not a one size fits all. But we're never talking about achievement, right? This is not like, hey, he's great because he invented this or invented that. That's a different kind of greatness that can partake of true greatness, right? In other words, being smart, you get no credit for being smart. You could be smart and evil. Hitler was pretty smart. Being smart is worthless. The question is, what do you do with it? And the larger question is, what do you do with all the gifts you have? How do you use them? If you use them in a way that blesses other people, that is true greatness. And I think when we're lying on our deathbed, going over our lives, we know that it's not like, hey, I ran the 100-yard dash, at this speed, and that's what makes me great. Or I wrote this many books, or I did this, or I didn't do that, or whatever. I mean, ultimately, God's idea of greatness, it's a different thing. It's got nothing to do with your IQ. It's got nothing to do with money. It's got nothing to do with accomplishments in the standard way. When I think of Jesus, who's my ultimate hero, his greatest accomplishment was dying. Now, let's just think about that for a second. That's as counterintuitive as anything any of us could imagine. To die, to give yourself willingly to die for others, it's the ultimate, it's why we celebrate Easter, because it's because of that ultimate sacrifice for others that he is the greatest. And, when Jesus says that he who would be greatest would be the servant of all, you think of the irony that's wrapped up. Our whole lives, the meaning of life is this paradox that to serve others is to be great. That's deep stuff. So I just thought it's one thing to talk about it. It's another thing to see it embodied in lives. And so when you see it in the life of someone whether a parent or a grandparent or an uncle or a coach or somebody, it means something. And when you read about it in an historical figure, like I have in these books, it's flesh on the bones. It's not just some abstract ideas, but you see how a person does this thing, how a person was truly great. And, I think that there's so many others besides the ones in my books, but you got to start somewhere. So I got 7 Men, 7 Women, and the new one is 7 More Men.
And I think one of the things that is a common denominator in all of the individuals that you've written about, both, in your biographies, Bonhoeffer and Wilberforce and Martin Luther, there is a desire to be the best that they can be. There is something driving them to not be satisfied with mediocrity in any of its forms. So you just said, and I agree with you 100%, Jesus being the greatest hero, the one, that we can set the standard by. There's a lot of us that believe that, mistakenly, I feel, that in order to be great, in order to attain our highest level of usefulness, to attain our best, whatever it is, then we've got to be perfect before God can use us. We've got to reach that level of goodness before God goes, oh, you qualify. Right. Now you're finally where I can use you. It's taken you a long time, pal, but you're finally here. Let's get busy. What do you say to that?
Well, I mean, it's funny because, again, it gets to the paradox. One of the reasons that I know Christianity is true is because of the paradoxical nature of truth. It's so amazing when you think about it. I mean, I said earlier that, Jesus says he who would be greatest would be servant of all. And you think, what are you talking about? Right. He who was the creator of the universe washed the feet of his disciples, whom he created, whom he invented. It's totally paradoxical. And similarly, the idea that if you want to be great, you need to just, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and just like work harder and whatever. Now, those are not unimportant things. But if that's your number one focus, you're missing it. God says the only way you can really be great is by submitting yourself and your talents to me. Give me your time, your energy, your talents, which, by the way, I gave you. But if you give them back to me, I can use them for my purposes, which will bless you and bless many more than you ever could bless. And so I think that, there is something about excellence that's important, but it's excellence for others. Why would William Wilberforce, for example, work so hard? Was it to pat himself on the back and say, I work harder than anybody else? No, he cared about the African slaves. He cared so much about them that he would not rest, that he would work as hard as he could. He would find the best people and work as well as he possibly could. That's a different kind of best, right? It's best for others. It's not best to make me look great. It's about me. No. It's about God's purposes in history, about doing something for others. And for most of us, that's just our family or our colleagues, our neighbors, or our community. It doesn't need to be on a world level. God doesn't care, for everybody to do the same thing. He just puts us where he puts us. But the stories, in these books, they're very varied in the sense that it's not kind of like everybody doing sort of the same thing. They're dramatically different stories. I can't even remember. I have to look at my own book to remember who they are. But we have an evangelist, which is George Whitefield, one of the greatest evangelists, I think probably the greatest evangelist in the history of the world, no joke. I talked about him in my book, If You Can Keep It, about America.
Right.
And I said his story is amazing, but he's a straight up evangelist. But then you have, the scientist, George Washington Carver. I honestly didn't know that story. Here's a black man who grew up at a time when blacks were genuinely horribly oppressed. He was so humble that it will just break your heart that this man worked so hard and achieved such great things. And he wanted to do it for his people. Now, he was a Christian, but he said, I want to lift up my people. And he worked hard for them. And it breaks your heart how what a sweet human being he was. And, then, of course, there's the story of Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Where do you begin there? This is one of the most amazing characters in the history of the world, one of the most courageous figures. He was a writer, but his main story is suffering under the Soviet Union, under the communist regime, and how he reacted to it. And what a great-souled human being he was, and how dedicated he was to writing all these stories down so that we could be the beneficiary, so that we could learn the lesson that he learned.
Understand what was really happening above and beyond all the propaganda.
It's just So there are all kinds of different stories. I also tell the story of Sergeant Alvin York, who was a figure who was really a pacifist, but he became persuaded during World War I that he needed to rethink his theology with regard to picking up a gun. And it's just a moving, amazing story. And again, I think that we need stories like this in this day and age when most of the media is focused on anti-heroes and just negative, nasty stuff. We need the stories of real people who were just truly great, and they lived, and this is true. This is not fiction, and we need to know it.
Right now the audience is they're salivating and they're clamoring because they want more Eric Metaxas. They want to know how can they get more of your books? How can they read your bios? How can they read the stuff that you put out? And more importantly, how can they get in touch with your radio show? Not to interfere with our program in the morning. You would never want to do that. Before we lose and before we
look, it couldn't be easier. First of all, I have a daily radio show, 2 hours a day. It's called the Eric Metaxas Show. You can listen to it on Alexa. You can say, Alexa, play the Eric Metaxas Show, and it'll come on. You can listen to it on your local radio. It's across the country on 300 stations around the country. But you can also go on your phone. You can get an app. You just put in Metaxas, and the show will come right up. You can listen 24/7. But I'm also telling all my friends, go to YouTube, because the Eric Metaxas Show has a YouTube channel, and everything is put there. So you can watch it as a video, or you can have it in the background, while you're doing stuff. And if you want to see what I look like on a particular day or what my guest looks like, most of it is filmed in a gorgeous studio. So it's kind of cool. But if you just go to YouTube and go to the Eric Metaxas Show, most of it will be there. I am all over the web. I've got a website, ericmetaxas.com. I'm hard to miss if you really do want to find me. And I'm honored that you would suggest that. I do have a lot of books. I'm proud of them. And I wish I could give them away free to everybody, because I think there's certain things that we all need to know that will improve our lives if we know them. I mentioned my book, If You Can Keep It, about America. There's certain things that we need to understand that, are actually indispensable and important. So it's why I write. It's why I do my radio program. And when we're not, under a quarantine shutdown, I travel and speak quite a bit as well.
Speaking of that, you're in New York, aren't you?
I live in New York City. I was born in New York City, and my wife and daughter are here. So I figure, I might as well live with them since we're related. So I'm in New York City, not far from the Samaritan's Purse Hospital in Central Park, which I visited. This is where God has put me. It's where we record the radio show and where we do what we do.
How is it in New York right now? I know the news we get is pretty dim and pretty brutal.
Yeah, of course you're going to get all that. I mean, I can't really say. All I know is that, most people who live in my neck of the woods in Manhattan are not writers, so they have money. And they probably left town 3 weeks ago and are in a country home someplace. So the streets are empty. It's really an amazing time. It's an amazing time to reconnect with your families. My prayer life and Bible reading has improved. Like, it's a really sweet kind of respite, almost like a strange enforced Sabbath. And so I'm writing more than I usually get to, because I'm not running down to the radio studio. So for me, it's been a blessing. But of course, for many people, it's been a horrible struggle. But I think this is an opportunity to draw closer to God, to draw closer to our families, to focus on the things that we should have been focusing on all along before this happened. And maybe when this is over, we will keep focusing on what matters.
Eric, thank you. I really do appreciate it. I know you're busy. I know you got a lot of things you're doing, but I definitely appreciate, first of all, I appreciate an individual that loves Jesus and loves the Republic. I find that to be incredibly refreshing. Please do go and get Eric's books, all of them, because not only is he a very intelligent, very well-read and well-spoken individual, but he's got a great sense of humor too. And you got to find that in some of his writing.
Well, thank you very much. Actually, you know what? I just realized on Kindle, my Martin Luther book, which is a big book, but it's very, some of it's very funny and entertaining. It's like $1.99, literally, on Kindle, probably on the other e-readers. So in case somebody wants to try that, that's that's a bigger book. It's more meaty, but again, I wish I could just give them out. Thank you for appreciating what I do, Seth. It means more to me than you realize.
Well, next time I get up to New York, I'll give you a call and I'll take you and buy you a cup of coffee somewhere.
That would be terrific. Thank you. Come to the radio studio. All right.
Thank you God bless again. You have a great rest of your day. Stay safe, and we'll talk again very soon, I'm sure.
Okay. God bless you. Thank you.